Hello, everyone, and welcome. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Matt Petersen. I'm NAGDCA's Executive Director. Our topic today is an important one. It's Section 110 of Secure 2.0, which creates a new option for employers to help employees with their student loans. There's a lot to cover, so we want to get to it quickly. But before we begin, I wanted to let you know a few things. We are recording this presentation, so we get to question a lot. Are we going to send out the slides? We are going to send the slides and the recording to you if you registered. So all registrants will get the recording and the slides as soon as the presentation is complete. You'll be muted for the duration of the webinar, but please submit questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A box found in the menu at the bottom of your screen. Hopefully you're familiar with those by now. Your questions will only be visible to me and to Kristy, so feel free to send those anytime, and we'll get to as many of them as possible at the end. So we're going to save the questions for the end this time. We also have the chat feature open, which you can use to chat with us. It's only visible to us. If you notice any issues with the presentation, you can't hear the audio or something like that, just let us know through the chat. All right. I also want to send a quick thank you to the organizations who made our advocacy for Secure 2.0 possible. Here you can see the companies supporting us at our top sponsorship levels. Without their support and the support of companies like Fidelity, who provided us with an excellent speaker for our topic today, and your support as members, we wouldn't be able to advocate for the future of public sector DC plans. So thank you to all of you for backing our efforts. It's much appreciated. Without further ado, we're going to get on to today's topic. And I first want to introduce our speaker. Joining me today to discuss Secure 2.0's debt provision and other options for tackling employee student loans is Kristy Martin, Vice President and Student Debt Account Executive with Fidelity. Thank you for joining me, Kristy.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Really happy to have you here today. So let's dive right in. Student loans are a topic we continue to hear a lot about. We're getting a lot of questions about them. There's a lot going on. Secure 2.0 has added another option for employers to consider. So let's just start by breaking it down. What's available for public employers considering their options when it comes to student loans?
Yeah, I think there is a lot going on with student debt right now. So our goal today will be to unpack it all. Student loans have gotten plenty of attention lately, thanks not only to the student loan debt retirement provision within Secure 2.0, but also because of the ongoing pause for federal student loan repayments, the pending Supreme Court ruling on the Biden administration loan forgiveness, changes to government programs such as public service loan forgiveness, also known as PSLF, as well as changes potentially to income-driven repayment programs. There's a lot to understand.
It is a lot. And one of the striking things to me, in the government space is that the scope of retirement programs is really starting to expand. And it's really started to expand greatly in a short amount of time. For a long time, obviously, the conversation was really just about defined benefit plans. We, of course, have been very focused on bringing attention to and improving the defined contribution plan. But we are hearing a lot about additional benefits, emergency savings, student loans. So why would an organization look at student loan debt programs to begin with?
Yeah, there are really 4 reasons why an organization would look at a student debt program. Attracting talent is the biggest one. Yeah. We know that the generation that's entering the workforce today is coming in with more student debt than ever before. So this is a great way to attract the workforce of tomorrow. It's also a great way to retain employees. Student debt benefits tend to be very sticky benefits. Another reason is to help with financial wellness. As you can imagine, being in debt is, to put it mildly, an unpleasant situation. When you help someone with that debt, you're not only improving their financial outlook, you're really helping them with their emotional needs as well. And so we think that this type of program and student debt in general really becomes a part of a wellness program.
Yeah, it's an important consideration when you think about the whole workforce. So, evolving situation for sure in the public sector, especially. Do you think going forward from the conversations you're having with clients and what you're hearing from them, is offering a student debt program? You think that's going to be more common, more of a new normal in the public sector, or is it a little more of a niche thing?
Yeah, industry thoughts are yes. Student debt programs are going to become more common, and that's for a couple of reasons. For one, it's the size of the population that's impacted by student debt. Student debt isn't a problem that just impacts the young. It's really a reality for every generation, from those that are paying for their own education, as well as those that are helping potentially put children through education. So as a nation, we're $1.8 trillion in debt and climbing. And that represents 45 million working Americans. When you have a population that's that large, all struggling with the same problem, you have a benefits environment that organizations are looking for ways to get into. When you add to that the competition that exists for talent today, many plan sponsors and employers are looking for ways to offer innovative benefits. A student debt program can be a good fit because it allows an employer to help their employees with one of the biggest debts that they'll ever face. And you can do that in a way that drives attraction and retention for populations. Student debt just impacts so many people at different ages and in various career fields, such as nurses, doctors, engineers, teachers, attorneys, and trades, just to name a few. So a program can have an appeal to a very wide range of employees.
Yeah, I think we get numb to the numbers sometimes. 1.8 trillion is not a small amount. That's trillion with a T. So, you mentioned on the one hand, you have the students who took out loans, people who funded their own education, they're paying off the loans themselves. That's our traditional view of the beneficiaries of these type of programs. A common occurrence is for parents to help out now. So to be clear, do student debt programs pertain to parents who might have co-signed on loans for their children as well?
Yeah, great question. And I'll disclose, I have a front row seat to this because I have 2 college-age kids. So the answer is possible.
Soon to join you.
Yeah, so the numbers become a lot real when it impacts you. The answer is really possibly. The question that an organization can decide when it comes to if they want to include or exclude those Parent Plus types of loans is really a 2-part decision. The first part is philosophically. Do we believe that it's our responsibility to help our employees' children with their debt, as well as for potentially our employees' loved ones? The real deciding factor, though, that we see many ways is the economics of the decision. Do you have the budget to include a broader population, or do you want to focus specifically only on your employees today, and then at a later date decide that you want to expand further to allow for those Parent Plus types of loans? The way that programs are written today, it's optional to include or to exclude.
Okay. So you have the option, but there is a lot to think about there. Really expanding expanding the definition of some of these benefits. So let's focus in on the topic du jour, the Secure 2.0 for a bit. And let's just kind of start with the basics. Can you help us and our members understand just how the new provision works?
Absolutely. So Secure 2.0 has been anticipated for over a year. And we're really excited to see the student debt retirement provisions go into effect because it really allows employees to earn match dollars in a different way than they do today. Secure 2.0 has over 90 provisions, and the student debt retirement provision is one that is optional. What it will allow for is it will allow plan sponsors to add the provision within their retirement plan. And then give them the ability to match an employee based on deferrals, just as they do today, and or based on student debt repayments that the employee is making. So basically the way that this works, an employee would sign up. So they opt in to be included. And they tell their employer and the plan provider about the student loan payments that they're making. The student debt repayments are then tracked for the plan year. And at the end of the year, there's a true up. So you'll look at, did this employee earn the full match based on deferrals? If no, did they opt into the student debt provision? Yes. Were those loan payments, if they had gone into the plan, enough to get somebody to the full match? If so, they would receive then an employer match contribution that would be a student debt retirement contribution.
Okay.
So I think employers and their plan providers will want to work very closely together for this type of provision. I think I mentioned it, but I'll say again, this is an optional provision. So this is one that will go into effect starting after 12/31 of 2023. So really for plan years that are starting January 1, 2024, based on the calendar the plan sponsor follows.
Okay, great. So that's a lot of good information. That's a lot to digest. And I think your point is really important. There needs to be a lot of two-way communication between the provider and the plan sponsor to make this work. So, I think the most important thing is probably thinking about whether it's a fit for your plan. Something you said is really important, especially for the public sector folks, in that it's important to note that the DC plan, if it doesn't offer a match or it isn't considering adding a match, then the Secure 2.0 provision probably isn't going to be a fit. And having a match is a very uncommon situation for a supplemental DC plan. So we know that, and you'd have to be of the mindset that you were going to add one if you're going to consider this provision. So
Great point.
A very important consideration on the public side, and that does cost money, as you said. So let's move on. For those that aren't planning to offer a match, there are other programs available. So let's talk about those and how they work. So what options do public plan sponsors have other than the one in Secure 2.0 that they can kind of weigh in relation to this one?
Yeah, I think it's important that student debt retirement isn't the only type of program that's available to help with student debt. So maybe the best place to start is with the free stuff. First is, yeah, everybody loves the free stuff. So the first program that comes to mind is Public Service Loan Forgiveness, affectionately known as PSLF. It's been around for a long time. It's a federal program, and it allows borrowers with federal loans who work for a qualified employer, that being a government or 501c3 organization, to make a series of loan payments over 10 years. It's 120 payments over 10 years. During that time frame, they are in the public service loan forgiveness pursuit. And at the end of that 120 payment time frame, you have the remainder of your balance forgiven. Okay. So one thing that is, I think, important to know about public service loan forgiveness, it does require that the employee is in what's called an income-driven repayment program. So these programs are designed to take into account your income as well as your family size, and to create a payment program that essentially doesn't overtax you or overburden you. And it allows you to pay a portion of your student debt as opposed to the entire principal amount. So the goal with public service loan forgiveness is to leave a remaining balance that can be forgiven at the end of the 10 years.
Okay, that's helpful.
So it's an incredible promise. The challenge is the execution. It's a really complicated process to follow. We hear feedback from participants and clients that are doctors and engineers, smart people who struggle to understand all of the different requirements that are part of public service loan forgiveness. So there are definitely ways to get additional assistance and support and how to navigate that stream. Okay. There's definitely focus within the Biden administration right now to make the process easier to utilize and to create better awareness of how the program works. So there are changes proposed that may be coming this year, and there have been several announced One proposed change that we're especially watching is to the repay program. So this is a revised pay-as-you-earn program that will take into account a lower amount of your discretionary income when considering what your payments should be. This is an area where we think there's going to be a lot of additional energy from the Department of Education and from the administration, because these types of programs aren't the same lightning rod that things like broad loan forgiveness are.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So public service loan forgiveness, or PSLF, doesn't cost an employer anything to be a part of. It's an organizational level decision. Do you qualify or not? But from a participant standpoint or an employee standpoint, there is a lot more that goes into qualification. So there are additional requirements about the type of loans that you hold. And we also hear, because of the income requirements that for the income-driven repayment programs, that some people feel like the benefit's not there for them in public service loan forgiveness in terms of the payments that they would need to make. So those are, that's a lot that I've thrown out there, but those are some of the reasons that we see employers stepping into this space, because public service loan forgiveness is great, but it doesn't solve all problems.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. We did a webinar on it a while back. It is a very complicated subject, and that's a lot of great information. It is a lot of information, but it's important, as you mentioned before. You talked about recruitment and retention, to think about the needs of the entire population, whether the program, other programs might be a fit alongside the PSLF. So let's talk about some of those other employer-sponsored programs. What else is available? So you have the Secure 2.0, but there are other ways to do student loan forgiveness if that's your interest, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, so employer-sponsored programs are a type of benefit that an employer can offer to help employees with their debt.
Okay.
We've talked about Secure 2.0 and the focus on retirement, so allowing employees to earn match dollars based on the fact that they have student debt and they're paying it back. That's a really great way to help people who are trying to balance the goal of saving for retirement, but also the reality that they have to pay off their student debt. If there's not a match in the plan, your door is kind of closed when it comes to Secure 2.0. So there are alternatives to that type of program. The other version of an employer-sponsored program is what's called Student Debt Direct. And this has been around for a number of years. It's currently the most popular version, and it's considered a direct program because the employer is actually sending dollars directly to an employee's loan service provider.
Okay.
So different in retirement, dollars going into the retirement plan. Here, dollars are going to the loan service provider.
Difference.
Yeah, it also offers flexibility. So under Secure 2.0 and student debt retirement, your rules are defined by your plan design. So your plan provisions apply, your match formula, who's eligible, vesting, all of those elements are within your plan. When you're looking at a direct program, in contrast, you have flexibility. And what I mean by flexibility is an employer can determine whom they'd like to make eligible for the benefit and how much they would like to contribute. So as an example, if a municipality had an healthcare organization as part of their broader organization, they may decide to only offer a program to nurses, because nurses are a really difficult role to attract and retain currently.
Okay.
So under a direct program, you can do that.
Right.
And the dollars that you're putting towards the program go to the employee's loan service provider directly. The administrator of your program facilitates that transfer. So they're not going to go to an employee who may decide to send a portion of those dollars towards their loan, but may repurpose some of the dollars for some other pressing financial need that they have.
That's polite. I like how you put that. That's polite.
Yeah, there's no middleman in
Right.
or middle person in the scenario of a direct program. Dollars are going directly to. And
Okay.
what that allows for is to potentially help an employee pay off their loan more quickly, saving them time and interest. So the flexibility, I think, is one of the big draws for a lot of the organizations that we talk to. And also that the dollars are really going directly to help an employee pay off their loans.
Okay.
So most employers communicate these types of benefits as additive, so a new standalone benefit. And they're using it to help an employee in addition to what the employee is already paying towards their loan. So as an example, let's say that my student loan is $300 and my employer is going to give me an extra $100. The suggestion is make the $400 payment, because those extra payments will go directly towards principal, and it will help you decrease that principal amount. So that's how it saves you in interest and time. It works very similar to making an extra mortgage payment.
Okay. Yeah. So instead of the, using it to kind of cut down what you're paying out of pocket, you use it to pay extra and knock down that principal more quickly. Good program, and very different than what's available in Secure 2.0. And I think it's important to think about the differences, and obviously PSLF. So a lot to think about, public sector folks, especially. There are a lot of different ways to attack this issue. So when people are considering these programs, the decision process that they're having to use, what are you seeing? Like, how are you seeing them go through that as they're thinking about whether this is a fit for their plan?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because these benefits are new, I think the focus that we hear is really thinking about the future and where you're going with your benefits offering. So the private sector has been moving into the student debt program space for a number of years, and we're starting to see public sector looking for additional levers. So ways that you can compete for talent. Yeah. If you're looking for that additional lever, one of the first questions that you probably want to understand is, does my workforce have a problem with student debt today? And that's not always the easiest piece of information to put your fingers on. So we've seen some employers do surveys of their workforce, asking employees what type of benefits they're looking for, what would they like to see added, even specific questions around, do you have student debt? Is this something that you feel is a burden? So that's definitely something that we see, that type of survey. There are also potentially more precise ways to get that type of information. It's something that Fidelity offers, and I would suspect many offer to their clients. And it allows you to get that precise number of what percentage of my population is impacted by student debt and how is it impacting different roles potentially. So I'm currently working with a client of ours that is a city. We completed an analysis for them recently. We found that 25% of their population had student debt. They were blown away. They had no idea that it was that percentage. So we have clients, specifically when you think about healthcare focus, that student debt's even more prevalent than that. We see ranges of 30 to upwards of 50% of populations carrying student debt. When you know that type of information, you then can weigh whether this type of benefit is something worth pursuing.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. We talk about data a lot, within the plan, but understanding the plan, who your employees are, the data can certainly help answer those questions. It is hard to come by. And I think especially, when you consider some, maybe the bigger state plans with very diverse populations, figuring out what that number is going to be very tough to do. But the closer you can get, the better you can serve those populations. And again, there's also the PSLF to weigh in the decision-making process. So do you think it could be a lack of incentive, honestly, for public sector employers to offer student loan programs because PSLF exists?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, we have heard from some employers that they don't think that they need to put organizational dollars towards student debt because they have federal programs that their employees qualify for. The reality is not everyone can take advantage of those programs. The first disqualifier would be, as an example, private loans. So even if I work for a qualified employer, if I have private loans, I can't use public service loan forgiveness because it doesn't apply.
Yeah, your loan is serviced by a private organization as opposed to the government. But if you have government loans, then you can participate, right? Which is a lot of people, for sure.
Yeah. Another example would be those that are priced out of forgiveness because of their income.
Yeah.
So when your income changes year over year within this 10-year process of applying for public service loan forgiveness, that means that your payments change too. So the way that an income-driven repayment program is designed to work, it's designed to not be burdensome for you when you're at your lowest earning point or pay point within your career path. As you earn more, you pay more. So you can end up in a position where your income increases and all of a sudden your payments are way more than they were before. Kind of a whammy when you start to feel good about
right.
increased earnings, and then you get the brick on your head and your payments are going up. So in the public sector, we see really looking at the broader organization, contemplating can everyone take advantage of this or maybe not. And then I think the other reason that we hear employers that are looking at this type of program is designing benefits that employees value. So it's thinking about the workforce of tomorrow, or really the workforce that I have today, and how I'm going to retain them and how I'm going to attract talent that I need going forward. So public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment programs aren't a competitive advantage when you're competing against other public sector organizations for talent.
Yeah, that's true. Right.
Everyone has that same availability. So if you're looking for something that differentiates your benefits, then an employer-sponsored program can maybe play a part in offering a benefits program that has wide appeal. So gives you the opportunity to really shine. And if you think a third of the American workforce has student debt, potentially there is a good audience for this type of benefit that would appreciate help.
Yeah, that's well put. And you think about some of the groups that could potentially be affected if you do have doctors or you have lawyers who are part of your population. They're going to be carrying a lot more debt. They're probably going to be over the income limits. They might not be sticking around 10 years. So they could be populations who really would appreciate a employer-sponsored benefits instead of the PSLF. So all very good points. The private loan piece is one that's especially important to consider, important for our folks to consider. A lot of people did the right thing. They consolidated their loans, through a private service, and now they realize that in hindsight that made them ineligible for the PSLF program. So you talk about a whammy, that would certainly be one. Okay, so we've covered a lot of really good information. We've thrown a lot at the folks in the audience. I do want to recap before we get into questions. Can you just kind of put a little bit of a summary on what the options are, the different buckets maybe to think about these student debt programs in?
Sure. Yes. So the Student Debt Direct program and the Secure 2.0 retirement version both help with student debt, but the way they go about it is very different. So with the Student Debt Direct program, the employer contributes directly to the employee's loan service provider. Within Secure 2.0, the dollars don't leave the plan. They're matched dollars that are actually going into a match source within your existing retirement plan. So we think that retirement is really designed to help people who are not saving enough or not saving at all, potentially, to save towards retirement because they're not able to get the entire employer match. And the reason that they're not saving is because of student debt. As an employer that would pick the student debt retirement program, some of the things they might think about first is, do I have a match in my retirement program? That's the first box that we need to check. Second, do I have concerns that I have a portion of my population that isn't getting their full match potential today? And third, do I think that group of people is not getting the full match because they're burdened with student debt? As an employer, I would want to allow them a way to still get the organizational money or the help towards retirement that they were going to get with our match, and to help them save towards retirement is a very important goal while they're balancing other goals. The dollars staying in the retirement plan versus going out to a loan repayment directly, I think, is one of the key differences in the programs.
Yeah, good points. And there is, so it is a very, very different thought process for each. As our members, so like you said, this is coming up. It's, it's certainly almost here, the Secure 2.0 piece at least. So what are the next steps that an organization can take if they're interested in getting into these programs and learning more about them? What should they do as they start this process?
Yeah, the first step would be to better understand how much of their employee base is impacted by student debt. I mentioned earlier that one of the clients I worked with was surprised to learn 25% of their employees have student debt. So thinking about a survey or other ways to measure how student debt is impacting their population is the first starting point. Once you determine the impact that student debt is having on your workforce, then the next place to think is, how would this play in your overall benefits offering? What's your strategy for benefit? And what type of employees do you need to attract and retain? Is this a benefit that could potentially be a differentiator for you in attracting and retaining that talent? Okay. Those would be the next steps that I would see for an organization interested in exploring more.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. And as as the focus is changing, like I said, kind of early on in the public sector from, I have a DB, so everything's great. Now, having to expand that scope a little bit and go, okay, other organizations are offering this. I think it's a great point. The PSLF is kind of table stakes in the public sector. It's, if you're competing with other public sector organizations, that suite of benefits is really what you have to consider. And I think that's, that's new or new-ish. And so I think everybody, this is a good option. It's an interesting option. It's a lot to think about. There are a lot of details, but this has been some great information. Hopefully you all feel like it's a lot to take back to your organizations. Kristy, I really appreciate you being here today to discuss it. So we're going to get into some questions, and we've got quite a few. We got a few before from those of you who registered early on and sent a question in. So I did want to get a couple of those. One I really like that maybe I'll answer, and all the rest of them I'll give to you. But it says, do you think organizations serving this market are prepared to implement this feature? I know, so one of our board members, the state of Maryland, and I know a couple of you folks are on, they have already started to move forward and got some legislation passed to implement a program next year. So there are already organizations who are moving on implementing the Secure 2.0 version of this by doing a match into the retirement plan. So I'm going to give that one a yes for some that they're ready to go. But I think there's a lot of prep work to do, especially if you don't have a match right now in getting ready for that program. Kristy, I don't know if you want to add anything on that, but there is, as we said, a lot to think about.
Yeah, I think the readiness factor is definitely, the provision just passed at the end of this year, and we have 1 year to be ready to go live. So there's absolutely both interest and I think work on the part of providers to get ready to support this provision.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe Matt, one of the questions that came in specific to retirement or Secure 2.0 is to provide an example of how it works. So if it's okay, I'll take that
please.
one in this kind of space. So the way that it would work, there is a change that would be required to your retirement plan to add this provision for matching student debt repayments. That would need to be in place by 1/1/2024 or for the start of your plan year potentially. You would then need to allow employees potentially a way to tell you about student debt. So as your plan provider, you would want to have that opt-in process and a way to gather that information.
Okay.
And then throughout the year, it's tracking those payments so that after the plan year, a true up essentially can be done to give people the additional match dollars. I hope that was an example that helped to kind of outline.
I think so. Then there was a question about the true up, like how that would be done. Do you have any more detail on that, or do you want to get into that at all?
Yeah, so high level, the two things that need to be looked at are what were the employees' deferrals, if any, into the retirement plan? What were their student debt repayments? And then is there a gap in the match dollars that they got? So there needs to be a calculation done to take into account what's already been deferred, what the employee has repaid, and then to convert that to a percentage of their income so you can determine the additional match dollars. And that's something that I think a lot of plan sponsors that we're talking to are looking for help in that space and doing that calculation rather than taking that on themselves.
I believe that. It sounds like a lot of work. Okay, so we did get another one, and this would affect quite a few of our plans. I think I know the answer, but I'll leave it to you. So is this program, this type of program, the Secure 2.0 program, permitted under 401A? So we have some mandatory 401A DC plans, employer-employee contribution, and how would that work if they are? But I don't think they are.
Yeah. So as the provision was written, it applies to deferral-based plans. So think 401ks, 403bs, 457b government plans, and simple IRAs. Those were the specific plan types that were outlined within Secure 2.0.
Okay. And then what about the like a multi-vendor environment? So if you have more than one vendor, trying to think about this process, how does that kind of how do you have to think about it differently if you're in that situation?
Multi-vendor within the retirement plan space in this provision would add certainly some complexities to how you operationalize this type of benefit. I think the first place I would start if I were in that seat, I would want to bring together my different plan providers and talk to them about how this potentially could be operationalized.
Okay. This one is an interesting one. So it says, I've heard that there are ways to save some out-of-pocket costs for an organization and sell PTO towards making payments of student debt. Is that something that could work? Do you know if that's something that can work?
Yeah, so I think that's a version of student debt programs that we saw a lot of interest in at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's really died off. We call that a choice option. So I can trade something in for something related to student debt. If you think about where we were at the beginning of the pandemic, when that plan design essentially came in, no one was leaving their home. So we all had tons of unused PTO time, and organizations were looking for a way to give employees a place to spend it. So allowing them to trade in those hours for a student debt contribution was a way to do that. what we've seen since I think the economy and all of our worlds have opened back up a little bit is more of a focus on the restorative properties that taking time off have. So not just a focus on it as a benefit, am I using it or not, but is this a benefit that we really want to encourage people to use time away to refresh, to re-energize? We've all been through a lot over the last couple of years. So I've seen more organizations focusing on it having value for employees to take their time than looking for ways to trade it in.
Yeah, that's probably a good point. I think we could all use a little time off, maybe. A good question here, kind of to reiterate. Now, we talked about surveys and really ways to find information in your organization that what is the magnitude of the student debt problem within my population. Is there much that you can do beyond surveys? The question, I like how it's framed, is can our record keeper research this somehow? I think that's kind of the default for a lot of plan sponsors. We go, well, I'll ask my record keeper and see if they have any other ways to do this. Is there really much you can do beyond a straight survey?
Yeah, potentially, yes. This is something that when I was referencing the conversation with one of our existing clients, there are ways to pull that information in an aggregated, depersonalized format to get insight into how student debt is impacting your population without crossing the line of personal identifying information or knowing things about your employee that might be outside of the scope of what an employee would prefer you to know about their financial situation. So yes, and again, I'd say ask your plan provider if they can help with that.
So do ask your record keeper, I think.
Do. Absolutely do.
All right. This is an interesting one. I don't know if you know the answer to this, kind of on a tax treatment side of things. So it says if you can't match a student loan contribution to a 401A and would have to use the 457, 403B structures, would that match be subject to FICA? Do you know that?
That one I would want to take back and think about for a moment. So it's a great question. We'll take that as a follow-up.
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll make sure that as part of the information that we send out. So after this, when we send out the recording, when we send out the slides, we'll include an answer to that question. That's a good one. Good one, John. Always good questions. One last one. So this is more for kind of the multi-employer space. We talked about how a lot of state plans are structured, where political subdivisions can participate in their plan. Is this provision employer by employer option, or does the overall plan have to allow it? As a yes, no, and I would assume you could go by employer, but I don't know if you have any more information on that.
Yeah, within Secure 2.0 and retirement, eligibility for this benefit is defined by eligibility for your match within your program. So it's going to follow your plan rules without the ability to carve out other than for, do you want to include those Parent Plus loans or loans for someone else's education or not? But when you go into the direct space, and maybe that's where there'd be opportunity to explore, within direct, you have full flexibility. You could determine by a whole host of factors who you really wanted to make eligible, whether it be by job type, by tenure, by salary bands. There you're not restricted by your retirement plan, and you have full creativity to write a program that drives towards what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah,
it's interesting to think about it. There is a lot of flexibility on that side, maybe less so on the other, but there's a lot of variability to the programs. And hopefully, I think, we went to Capitol Hill last week and talking to some of the folks who helped write this stuff. They're trying to find as many ways to make it work with all of your plans as possible. So hopefully you heard something today. And if you have any more questions, please send them in. I think we got to everybody. But hopefully you heard something today that you go, okay, here's what I can take back, and whether you decide to implement these programs or not, as we said, they're optional. Hopefully the information was helpful to you in determining whether there is a fit out there, because there's a lot of movement in this space, especially when it comes to student loans. Again, $1.8 trillion in debt, not a small thing. And I think we're all trying to help figure out how we can both get people out of debt and also help them to save for retirement, a really tricky thing to do at the same time. So we did get one more question in. It says, I expect there will be scenarios that result in needing to make corrections after funds have been deposited into an employee's account. Would those be handled, the corrections, the same as those for contributions? So a pretty technical one there. Do you know the answer to that one?
I think high level, the answer is yes, since all of the plan provisions will apply to Secure 2.0 student debt retirement. My expectation would be yes, but gosh, we're already thinking into 2025 with that question. That's a forward thinker.
What do we do when this gets screwed up? I think that's always one of the first places we all go. So we did get one more. So it's when the match is made after the close of the calendar year, how does the true up affect your limits? So that's a really good technical question. Not sure if you know the answer to that one. When you think about the deferral limits, how that might affect if it's made after the end of the calendar year?
Mm-hmm. So it's going to be taken into account. You have the ability to test separately the group that is receiving this type of contribution if testing applies for you from a non-discrimination testing standpoint. But yeah, I love that people are thinking into the technical areas and really contemplating how this type of program could not only be deployed, but also administered. Yeah,
I'm sure before you jump in, you want to know what the temperature of the water is, I'm sure. So all very good questions. Well, Kristy, I think we're going to leave it there today. So Kristy Martin, again, my guest from Fidelity, really appreciate you coming on. This was a ton of information, all very good information, a lot to think about. So we really appreciate it. And thank you for joining me. And we'll be in touch, everybody. Thanks again for joining us, and tune into the next one. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.